Hey, 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 it's me, the Chief, and this time I'm not joined by Ben, but I'm joined by a new buddy.
Hi, I'm Christopher McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80 from the Full Force podcast.
Yeah, you better believe it. So, first of all, a quick thing. This is not Chris from Full Force being a guest on Talking Joe. This is a full-on Talking Force collaboration. Two superpowers coming together. I mean, to me, it's likened to the 1980s when in WWF, when Hulk Hogan teamed up with Macho Man Randy Savage, they formed the Mega Powers, which was an unstoppable force, brought low by a woman, but there's no woman here, so I think we're safe. I think we're okay.
So which one would you be out of those two?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, I was always a Macho Man fan myself.
Oh, great. So I get stuck with the ruined Hulk Hogan now. Brilliant.
So, yeah.
I'll just tear my shirt off then.
Yeah.
Let's get this going.
Fortunately, it's not a video cast.
Well,
I don't know. I haven't seen what's underneath your shirt, so yeah. Let's move on.
Let's move on quick.
So what we're doing here is we're talking. This is the Easter special, and we're talking about Action Force Weekly. So specifically those 50 issues, which started in March '87, I believe, and then ran for 50 issues. We'll come at the end. We'll discuss what happened post that run. But for the time being, how did this particular comic kind of come into your life, as it were?
Well, for me, it was just walking into the newsagents and seeing it there on display. Now, we'd already had the kind of toys on the shelves, and I've been buying, I think Flint and Quick Kick were my first of the Hasbro Action Force figures, as opposed to the Palitoy Action Force, which I'd had a few hand-me-downs back in, when I was a lot younger. I was born in 80, so kind of 82, I was a little bit too young, but I had these kind of like, our next door neighbour had a box of old Palitoy Action Force figures and vehicles, and they just gave it to me when I was probably about 3 or 4 years old. So I was kind of, that was my introduction, I suppose, to Action Force. But then when 87 came around and we got the Action Force figures, I was literally all over it, as I was kind of like 6-7 years old in that year. And it was like Flint and Quick Kick were the first figures I ever bought, and just blew me away at how amazing they were. And what was interesting to me was the fact that the actual figures themselves, if you flip the file cards over, they had Flint was David Fairborn as opposed to Dashiell in the US.
Yep.
And also he was born in Lincoln. So it was this really random thing where you're kind of like, oh, this is so cool. But then you're seeing the cartoon on the VHS tapes, which was, I think, dropped around 87, 88 kind of time when we started getting the VHS tapes. I remember picking up Worlds Without End and Flint's Vacation, like a double on tape, and just like absolutely falling in love with them, but being really confused because I was seeing G.I. Joe on the vehicle markings on these videos, and I was hit, even though they were overdubbed, so you got like Full Force instead of Yo Joe, and you got, which is the reason for our podcast name, and you'd get Action Force replaced, G.I. Joe kind of things here and there.
Freeze! This is as far as you go, Action Force.
And they'd also take out certain Americanisms, like I think it was bum was used as a put down, and they replaced it with jerk.
Easy, sailor, get a grip.
Let me at him. I'll myrtleize the jerk. Why you
Which I kind of thought was like quite funny and still quite American at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think any of my friends have ever called anyone a jerk.
Exactly. Could guarantee they called them like a or something.
yeah.
But but the other thing that was really interesting was they would take, like, bloody was taken out because that was deemed too violent a word to use. So instead of you bloody idiot, it would be you bloomin' idiot. Right. So bloomins were kind of put in there, and it was really funny to hear that overdub.
All right, already, I've got the bloomin' blueprints.
But so there was a confusion there because you had Flint from Lincoln, but with an American accent on the cartoon, and in the comic, and it was just like, oh my God. But then anyway, when this comic came out, it was, I can't describe to you how, back in the day, we didn't have this constant, easy access to pretty much anything you ever wanted. And the fact that, we didn't have that kind of streaming services and we didn't have the internet and all that kind of stuff, it meant that our internet were kind of comics, magazines, VHS tapes. That was the thing that we could replay over and over again at our own leisure. And that's where we would get all the fun, and obviously playing with the toys, of course. But to build the worlds around the toys and your play patterns and all that kind of stuff, you really needed that character development. And you got it through these amazing comics and cartoons. Yeah. So again, like walking into the newsagents and seeing the Action Force comic, it was big, it was bold, it was beautiful colours, it was amazing artwork, and the stories being so original to the UK just made him relatable as well. And then you'd get, in the back of the comics, you'd get a blooming reprint of the G.I. Joe comic. So it was like, honestly, the confusion was crazy as a kid.
So were you familiar, from a comic standpoint, were you familiar with the G.I. Joe comic, which had obviously come out 5 years previous, in effect?
This is a difficult question for me because I don't remember exactly when the G.I. Joe thing kind of started to make sense, because I was in the States in 1989 as a kid. So my mum and my dad and myself went on holiday to see our friends in Vegas. And we kind of, stayed there for, I think we were there for 3 weeks the first time. So we're there for a long period of time. And my mum and dad gave me some pocket money, and I spent the whole lot on G.I. Joe figures, walking into a Toys R Us, or I don't think it was a Toys R Us, I think it was one of the department stores, one of the kind of, it was a toy, they had toys in there anyway. And we go into this store, and the aisles are just, I've never seen anything like it, and I'll never see anything like it again, but it was just thick with G.I. Joe toys all over the aisles, wall to wall. It was unreal. And I must have spent $150
Ouch, nice.
on G.I. Joe toys. And they basically, I cut them off the cards, obviously. The cards were all kind of placed. I was very careful as a kid. I loved the artwork and I loved the file cards, so I kept all of that stuff. I would just get rid of the plastic bubble. Obviously I would tear it off, but it would be very careful. And then obviously all of the figures then went in this duffel bag of mine. And I just had this huge duffel bag of G.I. Joe figures from that year, and then a few years previous where they'd had some of the other cool releases. So I knew of G.I. Joe, I knew of it being G.I. Joe then, and I think I must have pieced it together before I left for the US, because I think we'd had friends go over to the US and they'd come back, and their dads worked in the US and they'd sent them toys back. So there was this kind of, I suppose, rumour going around that in the US they're called G.I. Joe, and then that was enhanced by the fact we would see G.I. Joe on the cartoon. You'd see it on the Mauler tank or the Silver Mirage or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, for me it was, I don't know, I'm going to guess a little bit because my memory is so bad, and I'm about 5 years older than you, but I was into Action Man.
All right, Dad.
As a kid, and before your time, I guess, and it just seemed like a natural progression from a toy point of view to then get these smaller versions, although it wasn't connected, but in my head as a kid it was, just more of an expansive line of smaller toys, and that then, and I was collecting, not that it's the same, but it's weekly, I was getting Beano Dandy, and I was getting a little bit of 2000 AD, but I wasn't really as hardcore into it as I would later become. I'd only pick up an odd issue of Dredd because it was maybe a bit maturer,
Oh yeah.
And that's when the Action Force comic had come out. I hadn't read any G.I. Joe comics at that point, but it was just like, wow, this is the one. I'm fully committed now. So, but I don't know where the Action Force comic actually, where it sprung from. You may know better than me. It's kind of origins.
Yeah, I can take you through. I'm going to take you through a brief history of Action Force quickly. I'll try and be very quick with this, and it is written down, so I will sound like a radio presenter.
That's okay.
Okay, so in 1982, and in an attempt to capitalise on the success of the Star Wars toys, a company located in Colville, Leicestershire, UK, called Palitoy, released a 3 3/4 line of military 5-point of articulation action figures, as well as vehicles and a playset, based on their best-selling 12-inch Action Man range from previous years, called Action Force. So at that point we get all of those kind of, para all like the different regiment kind of figures, basic kind of 5-point of articulation.
So is that the ones I had, and I've still got some of the cards on the back, is that the ones where there were like an SAS troop?
No,
and there were,
no.
That was before that, wasn't
This
it?
is prior to
prior.
the segregation of the subgroups, which are, again, is quite interesting that it goes that way, and a lot of people think that it's, it started off as Z-Force and all that kind of stuff.
This is where it was just German trooper, paratrooper.
Exactly.
Right, okay, I do remember those.
Yeah, kind of Arctic Assault,
of course,
Desert.
You're saying 5 points of articulation, of course, which is just hips, shoulders, and head.
Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Knees. Yes, exactly.
Cool. Right, okay.
Yeah, so at the same time, literally the same year, and pretty much the same month in the US, Hasbro revealed their own 3 3/4 military toy line called G.I. Joe. They were highly articulated, far superior to Action Force range, and believe it or not, neither company knew of the plans of the other to do this, despite having a relationship built up from the 12-inch G.I. Joe and Action Man brands. So even though they had that connection, they didn't know that both companies were working on 3 3/4 figures. And this was all born out of the Star Wars boom, the fact that they did the figures at 3 3/4 size. And so it was like, these are really popular, so we should do that. We should kind of jump on board. I'm
absolutely gutted about that. I had such a good, me and Ben and his brother Gav, we had such big Star Wars collections.
Same.
Mine was massive. I had like 2 AT-ATs, like 3 X-Wings. It was horrendous, the size of it. And I remember vividly, I've got not many memories of as a kid, but one,
all the bad ones.
One that stands out, is a car boot sale in a little town called Verwood, outside of a supermarket called Safeway.
Wow.
And which Ben's brother Gav would actually end up working there. And I remember a car boot sale, I must have been, maybe 11 and maybe 10, and mountain bikes had just come out. No one in the town had a mountain bike. I was like, I really want a mountain bike. So I sold all my Star Wars at a car boot sale, probably for like 20p a figure. All these vehicles got me enough to buy a mountain bike, which I think was like 150 quid. So I didn't get much, and then nothing left now. But anyway,
I sold all mine for nothing at a car boot sale, pretty much. Like Mum and Dad were like, they didn't pressure me to do it, but it was like one of those things where when they gave you the option and said you could have some money at the end of this, you're kind of like, oh, okay. But I was reluctant anyway. And there were people waiting there from literally the moment we put that stuff out there, like Gannets, and we were selling the figures for 50p a pop. I think I ended up with 11 quid by the end of it. And it was just all of that for nothing. Anyway,
carry on.
Sorry, so the relationship grows stronger over the next few years, and some G.I. Joe figures were used as vehicle drivers for the line. So that's when I think it's 83, 84. Those are the years 83 when they start doing sub-teams, and you get Z-Force, Q-Force, Space Force, Red Shadows, and Z-Force, Q-Force, Space Force, SAS Force, and Red Shadows, who are the bad guys.
Some of those were more than 5-point articulation, or not quite at that point. So I remember there was there was a Red Shadow drivers. There was a repaint of a Hiss driver.
You had actually you had Red Laser, who was a repainted Cobra Commander. You had Red Jackal, who was a repainted Destro. You had, in the G.I. Joe team, you had Snake Eyes was repainted and called Stalker, and he was just given, I say repainted, he was just painted like a grey face mask, just around the mouth. And then you had Blades, who was a SAS repaint of Tripwire.
I've got that, I'm looking at it right now, I've got it in the cabinet right here, SAS Hawk and Blades.
Yeah, brilliant. Again, that's the Fang repainted as well.
Repainted. And the other one I had was the Mirage bike, which was repainted green and black, and had, I think it was a repainted
Quarrel.
Scarlet. Yes.
Yes. Quarrel as Scarlet, absolutely. So there were, and Steeler as well with the tank. So and also the big ones like Stalker, and it was called Jammer, and Gung Ho called Gaucho, and they were the 2 figures included with the HQ, which was Z-Force HQ.
Yeah, I've still got that Jammer. I posted some pics up online when I came up to the loft a few months ago and had a route around all the figures. I've still got a Jammer, and I posted it up, and I was inundated. I've got no clue about the collecting market at all, and I was inundated with people saying, "Are you selling? Are you selling? Are you selling?"
Yeah, people love that figure, especially the no camo Jammer variant and the different camo. But honestly, there's a few variants of that figure that just go for ridiculous money. So that was 83 and 84, and then in 1985, basically Hasbro took over completely and said, because this was basically Palitoy were winding down, and that's a whole other episode of information to go through, but Palitoy were winding down as a company, and in 85 Hasbro basically just had all of the kind of figures like Duke, and this is like a new rebrand of Action Force and Cobra. Red Shadows were gone, and kind of running simultaneously at the same time was this Battle Action Force comic. So Battle had featured Action Force in a couple of strips early on, and they were so popular that they decided to make Battle Action Force, which was the IPC publication comic at the time, and they did all of the the Action Force comics, which little plug of our podcast, but Brian Hickey and I do a YouTube video series called Disorder of Battle, where we go through all of the different comic stories together, review them and all that kind of stuff. So we'll be doing another one very soon, but I think we're only about 5 episodes in, so you can
I should
catch up with that.
definitely check that out.
They're fun because it's video based, so we look at the comic in depth,
and this is on that sort of crappy old paper.
Yeah, like newspaper print,
Newspaper
effectively.
print, yes.
Yeah, and again, there's a charm to it, but you want comics to be, kind of like the real quality angle. But again, there's a real charm to these comics and some beautiful artwork as well. But anyway, we're not doing Battle Action Force, so that was kind of running simultaneously to this scenario. Now, when it got to this part of the storyline in 85, where Hasbro were basically just pumping out Action Force and Cobra figures on Palitoy-backed cards, even though they rebranded it with the different logos, you still had the yellow and red kind of card backs. So they're kind of putting them out for a year in 85. Duke was there, Baroness, Destro, all those kind of guys, Storm Shadow. The classic run were all out on the Palitoy cards. So at the same time in the Battle Action Force comic, they go ahead and make Baron Ironblood, who was the bad guy for Red Shadows, they do a storyline called World Enemy Number 1, where the Action Force basically chase him down, he flees, and then turns himself into Cobra Commander and kind of basically dumps all the Red Shadows in the crap, effectively, and then he starts Cobra. And it's funny because he says he's been injecting himself with cobra venom in this in a secluded kind of Mayan temple somewhere in the jungle. And Red Jackal tracks him down and he proposes to him, I'm now Cobra Commander, I'm stronger than ever and all this kind of stuff, and you're going to be Destro. So this kind of how they did it in the comics. Because obviously it was still going to be IPC publications, it's still Battle Action Force, and they still wanted to keep that branding, so that happened. Anyway, once it gets to the end of 85, Palitoy go under completely, Hasbro take over, they take over all operations and all that kind of stuff, as they do, and from that point on, we have a 2-year break, and in 87, they just go ahead and rebrand G.I. Joe as Action Force, so you've got similar card backs, kind of the black card backs with the digital explosion, and Action Force branding all over it, and that's where you have the file cards that we were talking about earlier on, where you've got David Fairborn and all the different kind of names and birthplaces and slightly different bios in some cases as well.
It's funny you should mention the bios because that is actually going to form something that I'm going to ask you about. So I might as well actually start now.
Is it a pop quiz?
It's an Action Force pop quiz, pop quiz. It's an Action Force pop quiz, question 1.
Brilliant.
Within the pages of Action Force Weekly, as you will know, there were intelligence profiles.
Oh, brilliant, yes.
And as you have alluded to, some of the details in there were contrastingly different to what G.I. Joe fans were used to. So I'll do 4 of these to start with as part of question 1. So Alison R. Hart Burnett is...
Oh, yes.
Obviously, Lady J. She has her primary specialty listed as intelligence. What is her secondary specialty listed as?
Oh my God, you're testing me on secondary specialties. If I... oh, goodness me, let me think. So, she wasn't special services. I think she was... oh, this is really going to bug me if I don't get this.
There's no shame in getting any of these wrong because I did not know any of them, even some of the primary ones. So,
all right, I'm going to use my brain on this one. She was in a story that I read recently because obviously I've had to do research on this.
Yep.
When she was in the Sky Striker with Ace. So I'm going to say something like aircraft pilot or something.
Aircraft co-pilot. Well, I am giving it to you. That is sensational work there, Chris.
Amazing. That was just. I'm just trying to be intelligent, and it worked.
Brad J. Armbuster.
Ace.
Yes. Primary is pilot for fixed-wing aircraft, and secondary...
Oh, he's intelligence.
He is intelligence.
I know that because Ace is one of my favourite ever figures of all time.
Yeah,
and with
Ben's
that
a
Sky
big
Striker was
fan,
amazing.
yeah. Okay, Scarlett is next. Miss O'Hara. Intelligence is her primary.
She's just going to be the same as Jay, isn't she?
She is aircraft co-pilot. How does this man
Aircraft
know it? He's got the issues in front of him.
I'm just making this up as I go along. I was actually going to say ninja, but before I did that, I said that out loud, and you took it as the answer, so I'm happy with that.
Okay. And the last one for now is Lee-Ho Ito.
Oh, quick kick.
Quick kick. Well, you can even try and go for primary if you want to. You're on a roll.
Oh, he was infantry.
He was
and
infantry, primary, and what was this?
Intelligence.
Yeah, intelligence. Oh, you're too good. Anyway,
I have studied, the profiles and all that kind of stuff. I absolutely loved that as a kid. I'm such a nerd when it comes to that stuff. Okay. Especially with the UK stuff, not so much with the American. Like, I love the comic and I've read it multiple times, but I feel like the Action Force stuff, maybe because it's a smaller run, but it just stays in me. You know what I mean? Well,
we got 5 more of those, and I'll hold those back for later on.
Awesome.
And now I cannot remember where I interrupted you.
Don't know. I remember. It's all good. So, like I said, Palatoid going under, Hasbro takeover, 87 card backs and all that kind of stuff. And they started releasing I thought I knew where I was. Yeah, so they did all of the changes and all the file card stuff, obviously to relate to kids in the UK and obviously sell to them. But at the same time, they decided to create a comic to help market the product, and it made complete sense to use Marvel UK because it was Marvel in the US who produced the G.I. Joe comic at the time. It was edited by Richard Starkings and his assistant Steve White, who also actually worked on the comic. I think they both worked on the comic as well at times. But the Action Force specific strips had no single creative team and were produced by a variety of talent, including the writing class of Simon Furman and Mike Collins, and art from Kev Hopgood, who I believe you've been speaking to recently.
I have. I'm hoping
unreal.
I'm hoping we'll be able to put that up as well. As people are listening to this, it might already have gone up. If not, it's probably going to go up directly after this. Yeah.
Can't wait to hear that. And Jeff Senior, who obviously is a massive name in the G.I. Joe and Transformers kind of world, to name but a few. And we'll talk, I imagine, about more of the guys involved. Definitely, as well. Yeah. The first issue was published on the 1st of March 1987 with a cover date of the 7th of March 1987 and came packaged with issue 2 completely free. It lasted almost 1 year and 50 issues, coming to a close on the 7th of February 1988 due to poor sales, which just blows my mind because I was just all over that stuff. When it came into the newsagents, we would have like a, when you ordered a comic in, if they would always have it in for you every time. But the problem was, in some of my old comics I own, they've scribbled my name in the top corner, which was such a English thing to do, wasn't it?
I've got that. I'm looking at my issues here. I had all 50 issues hardbound into a custom collection, and,
which I'm so jealous about.
Like you said, I did post some pictures before, but I'll post them again up online so people can see. I'm looking at some issues here, and it's got a big scrawl of surname, up in the corner. But brutal. I mean, I don't know. At the time as a kid, I didn't really care. But then when I went through my prime comic collecting years, I was a bit off because I was one of those board it and bag it and no creases, in that kind of boom period. But now I'm a bit more sort of laissez-faire about the whole thing. If it's got a wrinkle or a crease, I don't really care anymore.
I'm actually the other way around. I think as a kid I was very careful with the figures and all that kind of stuff, but with the comics I would read them so much they would just turn to dust. They would just be like so worn through with reading and like folding open to kind of draw stuff and trace things, and I was just so besotted with those things, like the comics. It was just like an amazing world for me. And obviously we're not talking about the monthly comic which followed this, but I'm sure we could do that at a later date with another crossover. Yeah. But that's another one that's really interesting, and the US factions will know that as European missions.
Yes.
But yeah, anyway, so that's the history.
I'm exceptionally glad I had you on, and I had you on because it's a collab, and it wasn't just me and Ben bumbling around, because you've proved your worth right there, my friend.
Brilliant.
Right, I'm going to actually open up my collected volume, and we'll start discussing some of these issues. I'm looking in the front. I've actually got some signatures here. Jeff
you
Senior,
jammed it.
Kev Hopgood, Lou Stringer, Mike Collins,
Lou Stringer, Combat Colin
Furman,
fame.
Yeah, Brian Hitch. I even got Larry Harmer to sign this one as well. Even though, well, I guess he's got content in there.
IP, and also you've got the US stuff in there. Yeah, amazing. So issue 1 then.
Yes. So this is, like you say, this was bagged kind of, at the top it actually says number 2 presented free with this issue. And cover, you've got Flint on the middle, Lady J flanking on the right, Footloose on the left. Full colour, only 32p, action-packed first issue.
Unreal pricing.
Yes. So this is good. And the first thing that actually strikes me is, and this is consistent with the run, is that Flint and Lady J kind of take centre stage, don't they?
Yes, Flint was the Duke of the Action Force team.
There you go, yep.
And to be honest, his image was used more than I think any other Action Force character on all the merchandise. He's on literally everything. Anywhere you would look in Woolworths or WH Smith or anything when you were a kid growing up, you'd see Flint on something.
They do that Marvel thing where in the top left, this is Marvel UK obviously, but they do the thing that Marvel US were doing where they've got that little box where you've got the date and the cover price, and they also have a little thumbnail picture of one of the characters, and here, like you say, it is Flint. Does that stay consistently as Flint throughout the whole 50? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
I'll flick forward. Oh yeah, I'm flick forward issue 21. It's him. Maybe it does. I don't know. But yeah. So this first, they're individual kind of story names, but it is kind of a 6-issue arc, which is loosely kind of titled as Coils of the Serpent.
Yeah, this is Gunboat, the first one, and that runs into like Hit and Run or something like that.
Yeah. So this is basically what this is introducing the team. You know who the heroes and villains are. This is Simon Furman and Kev Hopgood, like you mentioned, as the creators here, and it's a great intro.
Big time. Also, a couple of things I want to say about this opening page. The image of Shipwreck and Barbecue infiltrating the boat is just one of my all-time beautiful images of Action Force and G.I. Joe. It's one of those ones where it's kind of almost imprinted into my brain. And this is the basis for any of my play patterns when I was a kid. Like, I would always think of like what they were doing initially, going into like, what mission it was and all that kind of stuff. And I just love the way this is positioned, and it's just gorgeous. I just love it in all sorts. And the other thing I want to mention is the fact that we see our first ever new character, or character specific to the Action Force run, and that's Trent.
Yes, he's obviously exclusive to Action Force.
He's the Ministry of Defence liaison and Action Force command.
So would he have an opposite, do you reckon, in G.I. Joe world, or not really? He's kind of
it's a weird one, isn't it? Because he's almost like he's like Hawk, but then in certain aspects he's not. I would suggest that he's more on like a kind of general flag. So it's between Flag and Hawk, in my opinion. Like,
so he's not actually part. Sorry to interrupt. He's not actually part of Action Force. Is he just like a liaison almost?
He's in command of Action Force,
right?
But he is like, so basically Action Force operates almost as like it's like a sole proprietorship. They're operating like as a Ministry of Defence faction, but also there's a separate element to them. It's almost as if they've got, I don't know, it's just like, paperwork up the wazoo. So I think that it's mentioned that he is the MOD liaison, which means to me that Action Force is almost like a separate entity.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's happening here? Basically, I'm flipped over now. He's briefing the team. They're gonna try and infiltrate a boat that's kind of docked on the Thames because there's a big weapons shipment coming in, and Destro's involved, etc. And I'm looking at the team. So we've got Flint, Lady J, Barbecue, Shipwreck, and Footloose.
Good team.
Great team, yeah. And Flint goes to say to each member what they're going to do, how they're going to be disguised. And actually, with Footloose, because we're getting him here now in Action Force, and when the G.I. Joe reprints start coming into the comic, Footloose doesn't get introduced till much later in the G.I. Joe run. Yeah. They actually rename him in Action Force as Longslide. Have you seen that?
In the backup strip.
So in the backup reprint of G.I. Joe, you can see someone's Tipp-X'd out Footloose and put Longslide, because
it's some funny little things like that with the continuity as well. But we'll get onto that later. You're right. But yeah, Longslide, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love the fact that with the Action Force comic, more so than the G.I. Joe one, you see the characters kind of like without all of their uniform sometimes. Like with Footloose, he's not wearing his helmet, but I guarantee in like, you'd see him most of the time. He'd be wearing that helmet, even if he was just chilling out, like, especially in the cartoons.
It's a great introduction. The colours as well are really popping, even on these
Beautiful.
these issues that are 30 plus years old.
Beautiful. The artwork is sensational. The perspective, that one of him where Footloose is standing in the window, like looking down onto the street.
Yep.
That's a beautiful, kind of composition. There's just so much. They put so much into this, I think.
Yeah, and I think when I spoke to Kev last week, this was only kind of really his second big job. He'd been doing Zoids.
Wow. Yes.
Part of that was with Grant Morrison, the tail end of that run, and then
Crazy.
Which was Marvel UK. The comic was Spider-Man and the Zoids, and then just kind of segued over into this. So I think he knew Richard Starkins, who, for those that don't know, Richard Starkins went on to be very, very big in the world of comic book lettering, and then obviously
digital as well, right?
Digital and editing, a jack of all trades, if you will, and wrote the great Elephant Men series for Image Comics.
Yeah, he's a big deal, in my opinion.
Yeah. He's at most UK cons, so every time I go to a UK con, I always pop by, say hello, and see what he's got on his table.
Awesome. Yeah, and then we get the reveal of Cobra and Destro's involvement, Cobra Commander and Destro's involvement, and they're unmasked as well.
I wonder if this was reminiscent of that. We just covered it on the Talking Joe podcast a couple of episodes ago. There's an unmasked issue where Destro and Cobra Commander are trapped under the pit and they have to take their masks off. And this is kind of a similar-ish scene or setting. So I do wonder how much of G.I. Joe, or if any, Simon or any of the writers or any of the artists were aware of or had been reading, or what they were supplied with as reference.
I wonder who. I don't know who was kind of like the main brainchild behind the overall aspect of everything. I don't know if it was probably Richard Starkings. Maybe was doing a lot of the decision making from that point of view.
Because he was editing at this point as well, was he?
Yeah, editing and doing other little bits and pieces here and there. Because you know what it's like back then. Like you think of these companies, or like the Marvel UK company, as being this massive thing, like the Action Force thing, but it would have been like just these guys like cranking this stuff out at ridiculous deadlines,
And the beauty I've got here of having all these single issues is on the back cover of issue 1 is an advert for Thundercats crisps.
Oh, I love them so much.
It says new Thundercats crunchy potato snacks, and they come in 2 flavours, crispy bacon and barbecue.
Perfect.
And they also come with a free set of Thundercats glitter stickers.
Oh my god, I remember those as well. Oh,
they were tasty, man, weren't they?
They were good.
They
the
were
artwork for Thundercats as well, that has to be mentioned.
Yes.
The one they use on the crisps, that kind of group shot, the original artwork of that is mind-blowing.
Really?
Like, it is just so beautiful and detailed, and it's gorgeous. But yeah, those crisps, I can taste them right now.
Good stuff. So let's just not wrap up, but let's move on to the rest of this sort of arc, because it's going to set us up well for the future of these issues. And I just love this cover issue too.
Oh, it's the best. And we might have both given away our favourite cover.
Well,
here.
we will at some point during this episode. We'll take a look at what our favourite covers are. But I'll be surprised if this doesn't sort of feature in both our top 3s at least.
It's just perspective. It's dynamic. It's Snake Eyes looking absolutely bad.
Yep.
It's an eel. This is the thing. Like, the Action Force comics made the bad guys dangerous, and they made them look bad to the bone.
And it also gave a sort of voice or some gravitas to just the Cobra foot soldier. Whereas
Absolutely.
in G.I. Joe, it was all about the hierarchy of the big boys. Whereas here, there's some Crimson Guards play in several different stories. They get individual, personalised treatment. And here, this lowly eel has, taken on some of the best we've got to offer, and, he's made a getaway.
And then he, obviously he's in pursuit by Snake Eyes and Scarlet, and he ends up getting out into the open through a manhole cover, because that's where the Action Force base is, by the way.
Yep.
It's the hidden secret facility is in the sewers of London.
Yeah, so on this first page, it's actually, in the background, it's got a tube sign for Westminster.
Amazing.
So, and then down the side, I'll put this up. This is interesting. It's in very small font, written in vertical text down the side of the front page. I'm just going to turn it so I can read it. It says, "Warning, Scarlet and Snake Eyes are highly trained Action Force personnel. On no account should you play on London Underground tracks."
And I'm sure everyone took,
Yeah.
that notice of that. Yeah.
Because these are, for the purpose of new readers, these are American operatives from Action Force, and they've come across the pond to take this captured eel back to the States.
Yep. And like I said, he makes his getaway. Does some damage as well. He manages to evade Snake Eyes and Scarlet, which is, that's some skills right there. Scarlet, in actual fact, takes a...
She's taken like a harpoon straight through the bicep.
Ouch.
Jeez, and Snake Eyes has been whacked on the back of the head with a harpoon gun.
So this eel is like possibly the greatest ever Cobra operative of all time.
You got it.
Who does he turn out to be? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
And then I suppose it's run to ground then, isn't it, that we get to?
Yes.
And this is where we see some really cool things. And one thing that I was hoping to ask Kev face to face but obviously you've spoken to him now. Did you discuss the possibility of a hidden piece in this particular issue? No. Okay.
I'll leave that to you if you interview him, because I know you're keen to do that, and I think he's up for it. He's mentioned he's up for it as well. So
awesome.
Please do.
Awesome. Well, this is the thing. Like, he has actually mentioned on his Facebook page, I think recently, that the colorist, who I believe at the time might have been Steve White,
correct,
doing that. So he said that he drew basically the eel does a job on all of these punks, these classic 80s kind of cyberpunks on the streets of London.
Yep.
One of which is wearing Tiger Force trousers, by the way.
Yeah, I'm looking at that page now. This is brilliant. So he's got Tiger Force trousers. One of them's got a pink mohawk. One of them's dressed like someone from the Village People, and he's swinging a chain around.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's Dreadnoks before Dreadnoks, isn't it? Really,
it is. Yeah.
So
I'm looking. For
I say.
Where's the?
Okay, so go to the page after the eel has done a job on everybody, and at the top of the page you've got them all laying on the street, all kind of bashed out.
Yep.
If you look at the second panel at the top with Snake Eyes and Flint like voyeuring over this naked body,
I see it. I see it.
Now, he's actually stated that Steve just didn't colour that section blue, which would have then looked like the actual thing, but I still think to this day that that's his wang.
I'll post a picture. We'll let the listeners decide. I'll do a poll.
There's a poll on that image. But anyway, yes. Yeah. So he then obviously makes his escape dressed as one of these cyberpunks, wearing the Tiger Force trousers. And something I've got to point out here on the next page is the London bus has got a Transformers advert on it, which is brilliant in a marketing.
It's got Galvatron, I think it is.
It is, yeah.
This is, again, and again, I don't know what the collaborative process was. I probably should have asked Kev at the time, or whether it was Simon or Kev, but I mean, they've made it very localised, haven't they? We know it's in London, but the buses and even the way they've drawn some of these arches leading into Hyde Park or wherever it is, or the benches. It looks very London-y.
Yeah, big time.
Which is, a great little unique sort of thing, I guess.
And that's the thing as well, obviously kind of relating it to us as kids. Like, if you're doing this in the States, and I don't think there would have been an issue. I think we'd have been kind of like, I suppose, intrigued at what the US was like in a way. We were getting the media constantly through TV, so I don't know why they were too worried about, them not selling to the UK market, but this is what they did, and to be honest, I'm glad they did, because it's given us this whole different kind of universe, really.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, we then make it to Tasty Burger.
We make it to Tasty Burger, yes.
What do you think that's a reference to? Burger King? McDonald's?
Yeah, I think it's got to be.
Wimpy?
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue. It's an Action Force pop quiz. It's an Action Force pop quiz.
Amazing.
So, in issue 7, we see the Tasty Burger bar. Bazooka and Shipwreck have popped in for some grub. What do they
brilliant.
order?
Okay, so Bazooka, he loves his like elongated food, just like his weapon. That sounds really dodgy.
No salads here.
I'm going to say that he is. Have you seen his modern day figure is huge.
Yeah.
Every time he's depicted, he's either this huge hulking guy or a fat guy. So I would have to say it's all meat, huge amounts of whatever the biggest thing on the menu is for Bazooka. And who else was in there, did you say?
Shipwreck.
Shipwreck. Oh, Shipwreck's going to have seafood.
Right.
He's going to have the surf and turf burger.
Okay. Right.
How's that?
Yep, that'll do me.
No parrot food, because that would be that would be harsh, wouldn't it? Parrot meat.
So what's happened here then? Snake Eyes has actually infiltrated a Cobra chopper, hasn't he?
He has.
Have I skipped ahead?
No, this is right. So
Yes.
He's in the Tasty Burger and he's getting evac'd off the roof of it, the eel, who's now dressed as a cyberpunk.
The Tasty Burger's a front. It's a Cobra front.
And it also has a massive roof, because this helicopter's like
Landed.
huge. And also, I would love to see this in toy form. This is like the Cobra transport copter that never was.
It actually appeared in quite a few comics, didn't it? I think in G.I. Joe. It appeared in that Michael Golden drawn annual issue as well, I think.
Oh, God, the annuals. Yeah, God, yeah. Well, I suppose that's something we have to discuss, because that came out in 88. Well, one of them came out in this run, didn't it?
Yeah.
At least one that Richard Starkings had to do
I
a
was
lot of
talking
work
about
for.
the G.I. Joe, not annual.
Sorry.
I was talking about the yearbook, yes.
Yearbook. No worries.
I don't actually have any Action Force annuals. I think I had a 1987 one once, but I don't have it anymore.
God.
And I thought that just reprinted the G.I. Joe story about the formation of Cobra Island. Am I wrong? Was there an original UK strip in there as well?
There's all sorts of stuff in there. The only original thing in there is the text story.
Okay.
But yeah, I love those annuals for those reasons. They're just, and the artwork. There's loads of exclusive artwork. When you open the kind of the inner kind of intro, like when you open the first page, effectively, you've got that kind of. Yeah, I don't know. It's like a double page.
I think they're just called end papers or something like that.
That works.
Maybe
the front and back end papers are just gorgeous. I love them.
Cool.
Anywho, yeah. So Snake Eyes, you're right. He jumps on the helicopter as it's evacing, and there's Flint on the roof going. Oh no, he's going Snake Eyes? Question mark.
And this next one is Coils of the Serpent, where I think this is now on to 4, I think. And this is where Kev Hopgood is really, really doing some spectacular stuff. You get the Silent Castle.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
He renders a great version of it there, and his Kev Hopgood's depiction of Snake Eyes could be one of my favourite. He could be one of my favourite Snake Eyes artists.
Every panel, he just looks unbelievably cool, doesn't he?
Yep.
And I love it when you get the perspective from below looking up and you see the visor, and that shape of the visor just looks brilliant. And there's that second panel in the second page. I love how he looks in that. But and I suppose we should mention as well the fact that there's a really odd continuity kind of crossover in these comics where, the reason we're seeing this Silent Castle is because they're kind of tying it in a weird way with Silent Interlude. Not necessarily in this issue, but in issues to follow, which I always found kind of weird. But I suppose they were doing it for the backup strips, not to tie it into the US continuity, right? Yeah,
I mean, I guess because I was kind of looking at sections where that actually happens, and I think one of them is definitely in issue 7 where Gung Ho gets sliced up by Storm Shadow,
and they reveals the Arashikage tattoo,
and that's why, because when we start getting reprints in Action Force of the back material, it doesn't start from G.I. Joe 1.
No,
it kind of starts at around
20 something.
It starts around Zartan. It's around 25.
Yeah.
And Silent Interlude, which was obviously 21, isn't kind of in the same place. They don't put it before 25. It just kind of floats around. But so 25 is where Gung Ho is already in the hospital. And so to justify why he's in the hospital have been cut up, which happened in G.I. Joe 24, the Russ Heath guest art one, where Cobra Commander escapes and Storm Shadow jumps out of a tree and cuts him. Instead, they have a story and Jeff Senior art where it's amazing stuff where Storm Shadow cuts down Gung Ho. Yeah,
and brutally as well. That's another thing about these comics I'd like to mention. More so in Battle Action Force, it was violent as all hell, but they don't really hold back. Even in the weekly issues, there's like a real kind of violent edge to it, more so than any of the US comics.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, even just finishing off this first arc, Snake Eyes is in the Silent Castle. He's now escaped. We get the Dreadnoks, who have been let loose to hunt him down through the snow. And like you say here, Snake Eyes gets shot and he's bleeding. And then they're actually depicting the blood on a letter that he wants a telegram or a fax or whatever he wants to send to the team. A telex, yeah, that's it. He's written down, I want to send a telex.
Brilliant.
But, I'm sure the depiction of blood was probably something that was potentially frowned upon. But
unfortunately, the telex didn't have anything written on it either because he couldn't.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? Oh, it's from Snake Eyes. What does it say? It doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, seeing the Dreadnought, I love how, even though this is one kind of continuous arc, it's so different from story to story visually. Definitely, as well. Like there's a real, now we're in the snow of all things. Like, who would have expected that after the Silent Castle? Like, straight away. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful.
This is something that British creators have always been good at, especially with 2000 AD being an anthology and only having
Big
5
time.
or 6 pages to tell a story,
Yeah.
even though it's part of a multi-story. This is kind of what you've touched on there. Even though 6 issues kind of is the overarching storyline and plot, each one's individual, and within 5 or 6 pages, these creators are able to tell a story with a start and an end that is, not rare. It's rarely seen in US style comics.
Yeah, I got to the point now in reading recent comics as well where you can tell when the story's getting a bit tired and they're just not really trying, or they're just struggling for ideas. And you'll get that thing where it ends, but you turn the page looking for the next page, like thinking like, well, hang on, there's no indication this is the end of the story.
Yeah.
There's nothing to really say that. And I'm not saying you need to have an end, but something like a little mini cliffhanger, or like, something that could lead into something else. And sometimes it's just left open, and I find that really lazy. So what they did with the Action Force comics, you're right, it's like they made these really like compact little stories, and they work standalone but also together in 6-issue arc. And now we're in Paris.
Yeah, the team has tracked down some Cobra terror plot to blow up the Eiffel Tower.
Of course.
Why not?
This is another good thing. It's international, global. We're moving around the world. I like that.
And we got a couple of Ben's favourites here. We got Airtight and Alpine showing up.
Brilliant. All the A's.
Yeah. and again, like we were saying earlier, this isn't specifically Destro or Cobra Commander. This is just Crimson Guardsmen, both, and very interesting, male and female, which was really nice to see.
Yeah, like already quite progressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then. And you're right. Again, this goes into that thing you were talking about with the eel, like making a trooper like interesting, but also selling the Crimson Guard figure, which I don't think really needed that push because it was such a bad figure in the first place.
Definitely.
I wanted that. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's mine. I need.
Yeah.
So you can see that they're like trying to say, well, hey, it's not just a trooper. You can actually do things with these characters. It's almost like giving the kid the idea.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. Yeah.
You saying need? I have got a card back of an old Palatoy one with those first wave of Action Force characters that we know as G.I. Joe characters.
Yeah.
And on the back, I've written, and this would have been when they came out, when the cards came out, and I've put need, got, need bad, need bad, need bad.
Amazing.
And,
amazing. That is just that is such a British thing, I think. I mean, it might be an English American thing as well, but the whole thing of like, trading Panini stickers and cards and all that kind of stuff, it was always like got, need, shiny. It was always those are the 3 words you ever heard as a kid in a playground. Yeah. Got, need, shiny. And like that was.
It's what is the value? Is a shiny worth 5? Is it worth 10? Does it depend on the shiny?
Depends on the shiny, I think.
Yeah.
If you had just like half of like QPR, I don't think you really cared too much that it would just had a shiny background.
And again, unbeknownst to you, I'm not actually looking down here to my right. I dug out Mexico 1986 sticker album.
Oh, you beauty!
PK was the mascot, and I'm looking at the England team. Peter Shilton in goal.
Shilton. Oh my goodness!
And it wasn't.
Parker?
It's not. Who's in? No.
Oh no, that would have been 90, wouldn't it?
90.
So 86 would have been. Oh goodness me!
You want to have a guess or the
no?
strikers?
I'm not doing a football pop quiz. Strikers. Oh God, Hurst. No. Well, God, 86. Think.
I'm going to put you out of your misery.
It's not Lineker, is it?
It is Lineker, yes.
Oh, thank goodness. Not Gascoigne. He was 90, right?
Yeah.
So it would have been Lineker. Ryan Robson.
Robson was in there for midfield, yeah.
Oh, Keegan?
No, after his time.
Oh, it was, wasn't it? Oh, no, you're going to have to put me out of my misery.
Up front, you had Lineker. They listed Chris Waddle as a striker.
Waddle! Fudge, of course. I had his haircut as a kid.
He's got a mullet in this. Most of the team have got a mullet, actually. Kerry Dixon, who was a forgotten Chelsea striker.
Big time.
And Mark
Hately! Rangers!
Yeah, Rangers. At the
Bloody
time, he says he was at Milan, but yes, Rangers legend. So
yeah, no one knows of his Milan days. They only know of his successful Scottish Premier League. Yeah. Anyway, brilliant. Sorry. Okay. Well, that was nice. That was a nice side issue.
So yeah, that's the 6 issues. They foiled the plot in the Eiffel.
I was
By the
gonna
way,
say,
the Eiffel Tower does not blow up. Alpine and Airtight and the crew, they managed to subdue the Crimson Guardsmen, and all is well.
Is that a missing tash on Footloose, by the way?
I think you could be right.
Last page, I believe he's missing his tash.
Yes, oversight.
Or someone forgot to colour it in again, and it looks like a instead.
No one told him he had a on his face.
Amazing. What would be your next highlight of the series then, Chief?
Well, the next issue has got Jeff Senior art, which is obviously a highlight, but from a story point of view, I'm going to probably skip forward to the story arc Rigged, which is in issues...
Oh, that's my favourite.
Is it your favourite? I don't think it's my favourite, but this is issues 10 to 13. Jeff Senior's on art for 11 and 12.
I bloody love this story for a couple of reasons that I'll explain at the end.
In fact, just before we jump onto that, I've come across this page here, and if you don't mind, we'll just discuss this quickly.
Yes, go for it.
This is something the comic had every now and again. It's called the TAC page, the TAC page.
TAC.
I don't know what that stands for. I'm going to say Tactical something. Do you know?
I do know. It's the...
While you're
anyway,
looking
carry
that
on.
up...
The
TAC page would highlight different vehicles and weaponry, but the thing I loved about it is someone...
Tactical Arms Compendium.
There you go. Build a library. Build a little library of arms. And the thing I liked about it is it would have a specialist who would speak about the weapon, so it wasn't just bland text. So here we've got Footloose, and he's telling us about the Winchester 12-gauge shotgun.
Amazing.
Which is officially known as the Defender, but known by most soldiers as the trench gun. Flint's own trench gun is a customised marine weapon which uses chrome-plated stainless steel for protection against salt corrosion.
There's some detail there, isn't there?
This is particularly useful for Flint, as Action Force operations often take place at sea. The wooden stock has been removed and replaced by a pistol-style hand grip. This reduces the length of the gun, so it makes it easier to conceal and handle in confined spaces.
Amazing.
There you go.
Do you know what's really cool about this as well? It was at the time... I was really big into kind of SAS, guns, and there was a collected series of magazines called Combat and Survival. Do you remember those? I
do. I don't think I had any.
I used to love them. And then there was also, I think, it was like a guns and ammo style kind of similar thing called like I think it was just called like Guns and Weapons and Guns. I can't remember what it was called now. But again, like I was so into all of the different details that when these things were in the comics, I was like, just in my element, going nuts, reading these things and just loving every second of it. The amount of detail that went into this is so, I don't know, far and away more than anything else that's come after it. You don't get that level of detail in these things anymore, do you?
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't just they did TAC pages then they did some as posters, didn't they? Centre page spreads.
Yep.
And I actually had those,
I had them on my wall.
I had those on my wall as well. Yes. So some of these are missing from my issues, but I think I've still got the Sky Striker one, possibly the Dragonfly and the Snow.
The Mauler sticking up.
Don't have the Mauler one. But also this TAC page would even do things like, I found one which was the Mars GM 212 thermite grenade.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever need to know about that, then this is the place to go. So
there was the M16A1 with M603 grenade launcher or something like that was stuck in my head for years.
I have this one here as well. It's Footloose again, and he's telling us about the M16 M203.
Oh, nice.
So the M16... Armour light rifle may not be the world's best assault rifle, but it has sent many a Cobra trooper diving for the dirt.
But it's the one that was given to me.
Yeah. The gun weighs 3.72 kilograms and fires 5.56 caliber bullets at a range of up to 800 metres. I use a number of accessories with my M16. These include a bayonet, bipod, telescope and night sight. My favourite is the M203 grenade launcher, which fires a variety of 40mm grenades.
M203, that was it, yeah.
There you go. So Footloose is giving us the lowdown.
Amazing. Yeah, the TAC pages are great.
Yeah.
And I love those posters. And the Tomahawk was the other one I had, but I think that was in like the later monthly issues possibly.
Right, okay.